Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
We see this timeline as quite rapid and to be frank, pretty unreasonable.
Deadline approaching. BC Ferries workers have until the end of the day to disclose their vaccination status, but passengers don't have to. Also,
sooner or later, we do catch these people.
Pursuing poachers. Fisheries officers are trying to find 3 men who took salmon out of a creek in Coquitlam. And
This is called the saffron.
valuable new harvest. A farmer wants to turn Abbotsford into BC's capital for saffron.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, thanks for joining us. BC Ferries workers are heading toward a deadline. By the end of today, employees will have to disclose their vaccination status or be put off work without pay. Janella Hamilton has more on the concerns and any potential impacts to service.
On October 30th, Transport Canada announced employees of marine operators, including those who work on BC Ferries vessels, will have to be fully vaccinated. Days later, BC Ferries told employees they would need to declare their vaccination status by today and have at least 1 dose by November 15th.
We see this timeline as quite rapid and to be frank, pretty unreasonable for a workforce that's almost 5,000 strong to get all their attestations and proof of vaccination.
Transport Canada says it may approve vaccine exemptions for medical or religious reasons, but McNeely claims many members are running into problems.
We also have members who are awaiting information from their doctors or have had trouble getting to doctors in remote locations or even urban centers where they may not have a GP.
Those who don't declare by today will be put on unpaid leave.
I think Transport Canada put ferries in a tough place. 5 days to roll out a policy that covers a workforce of 5,000 is pretty fast for any organization. Transport Canada, I think, gave unreasonable timelines to BC Ferries, and BC Ferries has passed those really challenging timelines onto their employees.
And while proof of vaccination will be required for BC Ferries workers, not so for passengers.
Well, it's definitely reassuring for me on a personal level. I think for the bigger picture and for the sake of global community, I think it's the best thing for everyone.
Others say the COVID protocols already in place are good enough.
Personally, I'm fully vaccinated, and so I don't have a lot of fear for myself. And also, I've noticed that all of the employees, they're wearing masks and they social distance really, really well.
Transport Canada says it does not have the authority to order passengers be vaccinated because ferries are considered an extension of a highway, and that falls under provincial jurisdiction. The province did not respond to CBC News in time for this story. BC Ferries says shore-based employees will have until February 28th to be fully vaccinated, adding it does not anticipate serious service delays if there is a workers' shortage. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, West Vancouver.
BC's daily COVID cases have been climbing slowly in recent days. 555 people tested positive in the last 24 hours, bringing our 7-day average up slightly. 11 more people have died. We've now lost 2,234. 404 people are in hospital right now. 117 are in intensive care, and roughly 4 in 5 of those patients have not received a single dose of vaccine. Poachers have been spotted using nets to fish in a creek in Coquitlam. That is illegal. To protect the salmon fishery there, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans hands out hundreds of tickets a year on the Lower Mainland alone. As Megan Stewart shows us, they don't just patrol the Fraser, but the streams and creeks that feed the mighty river.
Hoy Creek runs through Coquitlam. It feeds tributaries that flow into the Fraser River, and it's a salmon-bearing stream.
Every 4 years, there's a predominant chum run that comes through. The coho runs are pretty successful year over year.
During the past 20 years, careful management has helped restore the Hoy hatchery in the face of urban development, habitat loss, rising ocean temperatures, and commercial fishing. But as the fish return, another threat emerges.
3 males caught fishing in Hoy Creek, and they were, dip netting or taking a small shallow net and rounding up fish and loading them into a cooler.
Fishing like this is banned on Hoy Creek. Even on the Coquitlam River, there are restrictions and limits. Otherwise, it's considered poaching.
and people reporting to us, telling us as much information as possible.
Like recording license plates and taking pictures, but stopping short of approaching anybody.
We don't want people confronting individuals because violence has resulted in the past.
Fines start at $575 and can climb to $100,000 for a first offense. In most cases, he says poachers are eventually caught. That's because they return.
Well, they may get away at one time, but they're going to do it again because they got away with it. Chances are we'll get them.
Hoy Creek Hatchery is seen as a success for an urban stream where poachers are far from the only threat.
One person with their dog letting it run through a graveled section of the creek, and that can kill several thousand salmon in one shot.
There's hope that awareness, along with enforcement, will be enough to give spawning salmon a fighting chance. Megan Stewart, CBC News, Vancouver.
And to report poachers or other suspicious activity, people can contact DFO's Observe, Record, Report line. That's at the number on your screen, 1-800-465-4336. An expansive cancer treatment and research facility is now open in Vancouver. The hope is it will become a national leader in cancer prevention and survivor support.
It'll be a leading hub of research and education, innovation for cancer prevention, early diagnosis, and survivorship nationwide, taking discoveries from the lab and applying them to life faster.
The Canadian Cancer Society's new centre is at West 10th Avenue near Cambie. It has room for patients, lodging, in fact, and their caregivers, along with room to exercise and meditate. There's also a demonstration kitchen that will be used for nutrition research. The $26 million project was funded by the province and the Canadian Cancer Society. The City of Vancouver says it wants to protect low-income renters living in private single-room accommodations from steep rent hikes. Officials say half of the city's SRA units, also known as SROs, are privately owned. The average rent is about $560 a month. Officials say high turnover makes these units susceptible to frequent rent increases. A new vacancy control policy would tie the cost of rent to the unit rather than the renter and would include limits on price hikes. The proposals will go to council next week. Canada's oldest World War II veteran was honored today with a special ceremony in Vancouver. Richmond's Reuben Sinclair was born on a small farm near Lipton, Saskatchewan in 1911. As part of the Royal Canadian Air Force, he taught Allied pilots how to take off and land in the dark. This afternoon, students at Talmud Torah Elementary helped celebrate the nearly 110-year-old veteran.
Always found time to help people less fortunate. And I think that's one of the reasons that the good Lord keeps me around.
Over the years, Sinclair's family has grown to include 6 grandchildren, 16 great-grandchildren, and a great-great-grandchild. Not only is he the country's oldest World War II veteran, he's also Canada's oldest living man. A piano teacher in Victoria is using music to connect her students with the sacrifices we honor on Remembrance Day. The teens she teaches have each written an original piece of music for a member of the Canadian Armed Forces. Our Lindsay Duncombe shows us the moments they shared those compositions.
I think of sort of the story in the trenches and sort of bullets flying and rockets exploding and sort of this very vivid scene.
The name of this original composition is Outcry.
I sort of based it off of like a battle cry.
16-year-old Kai Stenson composed the piece for Corporal Steve Last, who spent more than 2 decades in service.
I think it's important for us to understand and learn about the past and what these people have done for our country and other countries.
33 veterans and current members of the Canadian Armed Forces will receive personalized piano compositions from BC music students this Remembrance Day. Victoria piano teacher Emily Armour came up with the idea.
Because I think on Remembrance Day, we look at the big picture, which is great, but in that big picture is a lot of individual people. And I was hoping it would give the kids a chance to connect with something really real on Remembrance Day.
Hi, my name is Ainsley McPherson. I composed this piece called The Lancaster's Flight, which is
This one, composed for retired pilot Graham Hafey.
I think it must force the students or get them to think really deeply about it in order to actually compose something where the feeling that they have about Remembrance Day comes out in the form of music. I think it's really profound, actually.
Wow, that's amazing.
The youngest student, a boy named Sullivan, was matched with Cold War-era reservist Troy Latimer.
It's actually very humbling that this little fella here would, take the time to do something like that.
It's emotional for the students, too.
My piece is for a veteran that has passed away and is being sent to his wife.
16-year-old Lola Kotke wanted her song to be hopeful.
It's really put it in perspective for me that there's still a lot of stuff like this going on in the world today, and that we still need to remember the people who have passed recently and the people who are still in it, right?
A lesson now felt as much as learned. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Victoria.
And a reminder, tomorrow is Remembrance Day, and CBC Vancouver will have coverage for you all day. That starts at 10:30 in the morning with a ceremony from the Vancouver Cenotaph at Victory Square. That will be live streamed on our website, cbc.ca/BC, as well as on our app, CBC Gem. You can also find coverage on our social media channels, including Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Saffron is known as the world's most expensive spice. Now, a farmer in Abbotsford says he is the first in BC to farm it commercially. As Benit Brach shows us, after 5 years of experimenting, the saffron flowers are now in full bloom.
This crop is a first for BC. A blueberry field now blanketed with these.
The berries have a not profitable business because it's every year price going down every year.
Saffron, his new solution for the off-season. The spice commonly used as coloring or seasoning in food. Just behind me here, there's over 200,000 saffron bulbs that have been planted into the ground. They turn into these flowers, each of them having 3 stigmas, which are these red threads, and essentially this is saffron.
My family, we are living together with my brother, and we are sitting on the dining table, and we are processing the flower, and then we can talk to each other. Then we have spend the family time too.
No machines, just hands. And that hard work means a gram of saffron is sold for $50 at this farm.
The reason it's expensive isn't that it's hard to grow particularly, it's that it's incredibly labor intensive.
The expensive spice also means fraudsters are a concern for saffron farmers.
So they can use a very cheap plant tissue. Even in some case, people can use some chemical dyes in order to mimic the color.
He says get saffron tested, buy stigmas over powder, or shop from reputable farmers. So far, the family is distributing their saffron to local restaurants. These are among other new crops being tried in BC.
Climate change is shifting the landscape here. We saw this summer, a lot of challenges from heat. There's some people playing around with olives, which wouldn't have worked 10 or 20 years ago, but the climate is getting significantly warmer. There's, chance to try some interesting new crops.
It's a new start, but Denlo is dreaming big. He hopes to make Abbotsford the saffron capital of BC. Benit Brach, CBC News, Abbotsford.
Amy Bell is here with her first look at the forecast. What an interesting past couple of hours, he said knowingly. We get all kinds of stuff now.
We never know what we're going to go, but you know
yeah.
what? Take a look at this.
Okay.
Things got very festive at the Coquihalla Summit overnight. That's one way of putting it. A massive snowfall, and the past 24 hours just blanketed the pass with more than 40 centimeters of snow. The southbound lanes were shut down last night for a number of hours due to accidents. There is some snow expected again tonight, but not nearly as much. We're just talking only 2 to 4 centimeters. So that is certainly much better. For us, it's just some wet weather that we're going to have to get used to. We actually saw some sunshine today, so we can't complain about that, but we will see rain arriving overnight. It will stick around overnight, and then we'll see it drying out a little bit. I think timing-wise for Remembrance Day ceremonies tomorrow morning will stay dry, and then we will see that rain returning in the late morning, early afternoon, and it will continue throughout the day tomorrow. Friday, we're looking at it easing off to showers, and then Saturday, we're actually going to see some sunshine. We do still have a chance, you know, you're excited. We do still have a chance of some showers very early in the morning. There's sort of a hold off from that system on Friday, but then by the afternoon, we'll see a nice mix of sun and clouds. So get out there and enjoy it. It's not going to last. We're heading right back into the rain for Sunday. But yeah, timing-wise, tomorrow morning looks good, and then we can look forward to Saturday.
You heard Amy. She says, everyone.
I said it.
Thank you,
You're
Amy.
welcome.
40 years ago today, one of Vancouver's first iconic apartment buildings was demolished. Yesterday, we told you about the history of the Anglesea Lodge, center of a years-long battle between City Council and the Park Board. Today, our Justin McElroy looks at the fire that ended that fight and why rumors over the source of the flames have never died.
For 69 years, the Anglesea Lodge stood tall where English Bay Beach ended and Stanley Park began, until, suddenly, it didn't.
And they said fire, so I got my coat on and my purse and I came.
The fire at the Anglesea came 2 days before City Council was to debate its future, after years of a dispute with the Park Board over whether to tear it down to complete that portion of the seawall.
It was a little suspicious.
It's not just the mayor that thought so. The only handwritten diary from a fire hall documenting the day's event said so as well. And an Emily Carr student who made a documentary about the blaze came to the same conclusion.
Most of them in the building suspected it was arson. They thought it unusual that when that fire happened, that an unknown person had gone apartment to apartment, urging the residents to get out.
When I talked to a firefighter several years ago, he'd been down in there and said that it had started right at the elevator shaft, which would have been the best place to set a fire if you're going to do that. He also told me that once they got a handle on the fire and it looked like they could save the building, they were ordered out. So it's quite suspicious.
The location of the fire, the stranger warning people, the sounds of explosions, the fire alarms not working, it all pointed in one direction. But just as soon as the investigation began, it ended.
The superintendent of the park, his desk had a clear view of the bay with Anglesea gone. He almost gloated over his open view and how that open view just was sort of the icing on the cake of Stanley Park.
The VPD has no archives of its investigation. In a phone call, former Park Board Chair Russell Fraser denied the Park Board had anything to do with it. And the mayor says his occasional thoughts of suspicion were just that.
Oh, part of my brain does, but there's no evidence to back it on. And in any event, that solved the problem.
Several months later, the building was torn down, the seawall completed. Dozens of seniors, all without fire insurance, sent to new housing across the city.
One older woman, I remember, she told me, I asked her what she missed about living there, and she said, Anglesea was home to me. I miss my home. Now, where I live, I'm dark, it's dark, and I'm shut in. And it was heartbreaking.
But you know, one of the problems with Vancouver is we've been too successful in becoming a kind of city that people want to come to. And we're still victims of our own success.
More often than not, we think about a city by what is there, not what is lost. And as people walk, bike, and run the seawall, there is no plaque to the building demolished 40 years ago on this day. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
The first draft agreement from COP26 was released today. There are calls for mitigation, adaptation, and bumping up carbon-cutting targets. But as senior meteorologist Johanna Wagstaff reports, environmentalists and critics say it is not enough.
When the first text draft came out today, it was met by
overall disappointment, especially from environmentalists, saying that the language wasn't strong enough when it comes to mitigation, but particularly adaptation. Not enough strong language urging countries to put more into the adaptation fund. Complaints that there wasn't strong language surrounding accountability and how countries will keep their credibility in the years to come. But as the day progressed, talking to scientists, there was some positivity, especially around the fact that this was the first time the words fossil fuels was included in a global agreement. The words to call upon parties to accelerate the phasing out of coal and subsidies for fossil fuels was Article 37 out of 84. Now, in the coming days, this is probably the most contentious of all the paragraphs. Fossil fuel rich nations will be hoping that gets weakened or taken out completely, whereas other countries will hope that wording gets strengthened. And it really is all about words. Trading the words calls upon with urges all of a sudden makes something binding. So this is really where the nitty-gritty comes down in the next couple of days when an agreement happens Friday night. That's all taking place in the blue zone. That's the area where you need all the passes to get through. The negotiations are happening, and there were a bunch of Canadians there. In fact, British Columbians staging a protest earlier today against the LNG pipeline and against accolades that BC and the federal government have received so far about their commitments. And they were joined by Pacific nations around the world. Take a listen.
We believe that there's an LNG-shaped hole in the middle of the climate plan. There's no real cap on LNG emissions. There's no plan to stop the subsidies to that industry. And we don't believe that the BC government is investing in a just transition. That no text is better than a weak text when it comes to market mechanisms. We would rather have a complete failure and breakdown of the talks than a very weak text that locks in these market mechanisms that actually will allow our emissions to increase and lock in increased emissions and lock in extra powers for the private sector.
So not everyone happy with the final draft so far, and interestingly, perhaps calling for the fact that a non-agreement would be better than a watered-down one. Here in the green zone, though, I cannot tell you how different the vibe is. This is the free zone where solutions and ideas are shared. This is where Indigenous groups and youth leaders have been speaking all week, and there's a real sense of positivity that no matter what happens in that blue zone, change can perhaps continue on outside here, and certainly enjoying the positive vibes today. We'll keep you posted. Johanna Wagstaff, CBC News, Glasgow.
The price of almost everything is soaring. Why American inflation is at the highest point in decades. That's next. Thank you for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream tonight. A Toronto chef is using food and his grandmother's recipes to reconnect to his Vietnamese roots. The story is part of a CBC series called Rediscovering Culture, about how people in the Greater Toronto area reconnect, rediscover, and reclaim their cultural roots. Have a look.
I think about Vietnamese food in particular when I think about connecting with my roots. And my grandma does have a lot to do with that, you know, like making these dumplings is big. Oh, it's hot. My family is from Vietnam. They immigrated during the Vietnam War. When I was a kid, I always thought my grandma was like a powerhouse. She's like the glue that holds everybody together. You know, on special occasions, she would make the dumplings that I'm making now. She'd start real early to make these just because it takes a lot of time. It's the thing that I watch her do it for hours. You know, she'd sit on her little stool on the floor. She had like a big metal tray laid out, and like this was piled up, and she'd have like a big bowl of dough piled up, and she'd do this by hand, like not even like with a rolling pin. She'd always try to get me to respond to her in Chinese whenever we spoke. And I would try, but it's not enough when it's not part of your everyday life. I could tell it was really just frustrating her so much. And I felt terrible. I felt really bad growing up that I couldn't speak anymore. This is my grandma's dumpling. This is the filling. I've never served that here. It's got pork in it, and it has garlic chives, and that's it. This is something that my grandma does. This is hers. And I watched her do it, and she taught me. And now we do this, you know? This is a vegan filling. and it makes sense to us. And now it's our story. That's the thing about reconnecting and why we want to reconnect, why I want to reconnect is it's like I'm trying to find my place in all of this. And I'm trying to find like this thing that, you know, what is that connection? Is it this? Is it this? Is it a blend of the two? Is it like, and I have my own story in there somewhere. People really love and respond to the things that really are close to our heart. I think about these two things and like, this is the thing that's closest to mine. And this is the thing that is also close to mine. Oh, this is exactly the way my grandma would have it.
Inflation in the U.S. soared last month, hitting its highest level in more than 30 years. And Canadian inflation is also running hot. As Jacqueline Hansen tells us, it's heating up expectations that interest rates will also be rising.
The price of just about everything in the U.S. is rising much faster than usual. In October, the cost of homes, vehicles, and food all jumped.
I used to shop based on what I like. Now I shop based on price and what I can afford.
Lifting the annual inflation rate up to 6.2%, a number not seen since 1990. TD senior economist Leslie Preston says limited supply of some goods is driving up prices.
You've really had consumer demand come roaring back as the economy reopens from the pandemic, and really the supply side in a lot of sectors of the economy just hasn't been able to keep pace.
After plummeting during the pandemic, inflation has made a stronger than expected comeback around the world, thanks to that pent-up demand along with rising energy prices and global supply chain disruptions. In Canada, inflation is also running higher than normal. In September, it rose to an annualized rate of 4.4%. The Bank of Canada's target is 2%.
Certainly a lot of the same forces are at play in Canadian inflation. It hasn't reached quite the levels or quite the pace that U.S. inflation has reached, but we do expect inflation to get a bit hotter here in Canada.
As a result, Preston expects the Bank of Canada to step in and hike interest rates starting in the spring, followed by the U.S. Federal Reserve in the summer.
Because these inflation pressures are proving less transitory than central bankers might have thought a few months ago.
Policymakers in the U.S. and here in Canada have said they're still confident much of this price pressure will subside eventually. But this latest data is a clear sign that's not happening yet. Jacqueline Hansen, CBC News, Toronto.
The leaders of Canada, the United States, and Mexico are set to meet at the White House. U.S. President Joe Biden is going to host the session with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador 1 week from tomorrow. The trio is resuming a trilateral tradition that was put on hold during the last U.S. administration. Canada has a number of trade issues it wants to raise, including a pipeline dispute with Michigan and the Buy America provisions included in the latest infrastructure bill. Climate change and the pandemic will also be high on the agenda. Annamie Paul is now the former leader and a former member of the Green Party of Canada. Paul posted a tweet today saying she'd sent formal notice of her resignation as leader and as a member of the party itself. She said it had been an honor to serve the people of Canada. Paul was chosen as Green leader last October, becoming the first Black Canadian to lead a mainstream federal party and the first Jewish woman to do so. Paul did not win her Toronto seat in this summer's federal election. The Greens fared poorly overall, and she was facing the prospect of a leadership review amid party turmoil. Indigenous veterans are now part of Remembrance Day ceremonies, but they were excluded from laying wreaths until the mid-1990s. However, their inclusion in Remembrance Day events is taking much longer. And as Olivia Stefanovic explains, at least one branch of the Royal Canadian Legion is working to change that.
This Remembrance Day is different for Scott Norton. For the first time, he and other Indigenous veterans are being invited by a Royal Canadian Legion to offer their own tribute for the fallen.
I'm humbled. I guess a sense of pride that we're being included.
Norton, who was a reservist in the Canadian Armed Forces for 7 years, asked to be part of Remembrance Day ceremonies in the past, but those requests were always met with silence.
It was really frustrating because the way I looked at it was I trained with all these brothers and sisters.
That's changing this year, following a reckoning of truth and reconciliation.
The findings of our children has raised more of an awareness to our society of what really has happened.
The discovery of unmarked graves near former residential school sites and the inequities faced by Indigenous veterans who weren't given the same benefits or support after coming back from service compelled Angie Holman to act.
And I see this as that, as settlers and Indigenous people respecting each other and walking side by side.
She asked her Legion branch in southwestern Ontario to invite an Indigenous veteran to lay a wreath created by Indigenous youth.
I'm filled full of so much hope that this is forward, that this is the first of many.
The first wreaths to honor Indigenous veterans were laid at the National War Memorial back in 1995, after the creation of Indigenous Veterans Day. But their involvement in Remembrance Day events took much longer.
We need to learn, we need to understand who our Indigenous peoples are.
Norton hopes other legions will follow, creating a sense of belonging, treating all veterans as equals. Olivia Stefanovic, CBC News, Ottawa.
With BC facing its worst year yet for toxic drug deaths, the mayor of Chilliwack is speaking out what he hopes for as the crisis escalates in the Fraser Valley. Stick around.
You could live through a lifetime of wartime remembrances and never see one quite like this.
They lost their lives while in the service of their country and ours.
Presiding in the rainforest is British Columbia's Lieutenant Governor, her elegant shoes planted in the mud. Around her, amid the logs and ferns, a small band of veterans ponders the rusting hulk of a wartime DC-3 and the fate of the British pilots who crashed here on a training exercise back in 1944.
At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
It's a strange story. Strange because it's taken 58 years to set up a memorial for the two pilots who ran out of fuel in bad weather near Port Hardy at the northern tip of Vancouver Island. Only the gunner survived the crash, and as the war in Europe drew to a close, the two pilots were buried with little notice in Victoria. Not as heroes who fell in combat, but as victims of an accident. And somehow that wasn't good enough for veterans like Lou Lepine. He thought they took the same risks and paid the same price as their buddies in combat.
Dead is dead, whether it's flying on operations or training exercises like this. So we must recognize the valor of these young men who flew and defended our way of life.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land.
Lepine set out to rally his fellow veterans to organize this ceremony in the woods. But it wasn't easy. After so long, the old plane was inaccessible and overgrown.
It was eerie, spooky. The moss was hanging down, very little light, wet and soggy. And there was the old girl sitting there, just forgotten. Well, she's not forgotten now.
not forgotten. It's the plane as much as the pilot that brings back memories for many Air Force vets. Few can forget the long service of the DC-3, workhorse which inspired loyalty both in war and peace. But what about the pilots? In this case, the trail's gone cold after so long, and little is known of J.M. Talbot and T.S. Wardlow. They just vanished into the statistics until now.
And we know that because of today, their sacrifice will be continued to be remembered where brave people meet and consider the power of service and duty and discipline in the service of one's country.
God save our gracious Queen.
For these veterans, then, you don't get forgotten just because you didn't die in battle. So this remembrance in the rainforest finally went ahead, even if it was 58 years late. Terry Malewski, CBC News, Vancouver.
Here are some of the stories we're following tonight for you on CBC Vancouver News.
Transport Canada, I think, gave unreasonable timelines to BC Ferries, and BC Ferries has passed those really challenging timelines onto their employees.
BC Ferries workers are staring at a looming deadline. They need to disclose their vaccination status by the end of today or be put on unpaid leave, and they need to have at least one vaccine dose by Monday. The union says it's too fast, and some members have had trouble getting doctor's appointments. BC Ferries says it doesn't expect many delays from any potential worker shortage, and passengers still don't have to prove they're vaccinated.
We have several hundred streams in the Lower Mainland and only so many officers that we can't be everywhere at once. So, I mean, we rely on those extra eyes and ears.
Fisheries officers are hoping people can help them keep an eye on poachers. They're trying to find 3 men spotted illegally taking salmon out of Hoyt Creek in Coquitlam with nets recently. Again, that's illegal and could lead to big fines.
Never worry. If you have a problem, fix it. And that goes a long way.
And some practical advice from Canada's oldest living World War II veteran. Richmond's Reuben Sinclair was celebrated at a special event in Vancouver today. He taught pilots how to take off and land in the dark. Students at Talmud Torah Elementary helped honor him. He's almost 110 years old. He's also Canada's oldest living man. Well done, Mr. Sinclair. The BC coroner's latest report on the drug toxicity crisis shows our province is on track to surpass 2,000 deaths this year. While Vancouver posted the highest number, smaller municipalities like Chilliwack are also seeing a worrying increase. At 39 deaths, it is one of several towns that has exceeded last year's drug toxicity death toll. Chilliwack Mayor Ken Popoff spoke to CBC Radio about the crisis.
If you take it from a big picture, yeah, it's staggering. The numbers are just, that's the only adjective that I could actually use with my city. Like the numbers tell the tale. We may not have the highest number of deaths, but if you take it per capita, we are higher than both Surrey and Abbotsford. We have, exceeded the deaths here already, and it's, there's still a few more months to go to the end of the year. So they're wanting me to move mountains, but there's only so much that I can do in my role. I advocate hard for some kind of a complex care or some kind of a unit too. If if somebody comes to me and say, Ken, I want to get off the drugs and off the streets, can you help me right now? Well, no, I can't. Because there's not enough beds available. I think Surrey is the closest place that a person could actually go. It's a perception of these folks downtown sitting on park benches, passed out or what have you. It's not a good sight. I agree with that, but it's so complex of a problem. The percentages of folks that are ODing in their own homes is quite high. And how do we get to those folks? How do we educate them? Do drugs with a buddy? I don't know. It's a tough, complex problem. And it's going to be interesting to see what Fraser Health is going to be doing to respond to that? Because the numbers obviously don't lie. It's in black and white, and it's a crisis like we have never seen before. When you tie in mental health issues to this as well, there's definitely a correlation in there that people are behind closed doors because they're ashamed of their addiction issues, ashamed of their friends knowing what they're doing, ashamed of asking for help. Fentanyl is certainly the biggest killer out there, and if there was a way to actually measure the toxicity of it, or if it's too potent, if there's a strategy put forward, myself and my council would certainly have a look at that. And if it was something that was province-wide or Canada-wide, I'm sure we would also embrace it. And we all work together, alongside with BC Housing and with Fraser Health. They are stepping up to the plate. They are going to be putting in a overdose prevention site. There's going to be a mobile, strategy attached to that. And there's also going to be an IRT team put in, that's an integrated response team. So that's basically just more boots on the ground to help these folks out. Yeah, it's tough. We have been able to secure a couple supporting housing units to get over 100 people off the streets. There's a third one that's slated for next year. So incrementally, we are able to manage it, but we'll never solve it. Just like any other community, they've all got their issues.
They're called iceberg houses. Not all that big at first glance, but down below, gigantic. The environmental challenges of burrowing underground is coming up. And at 6:40, a live look at Revelstoke tonight. So much needed sun today on the south coast, but don't throw away your umbrella. The rain is set to return. Amy, though, might have a bit more sun in her forecast. Stick around. A surprise announcement today from the world's two biggest carbon polluters at the COP26 summit in Glasgow. The U.S. and China have now agreed to boost cooperation on climate action. As our Chris Brown explains, the two countries say they'll work together to accelerate emission reductions.
Out of nowhere tonight came an announcement that appeared to catch everyone at the Glasgow summit by surprise. Adversaries China and the United States had struck their own climate deal. China spoke first. In the area of climate change, there is more agreement between China and the U.S. than divergence, said Xie Zhenhua, making it an area with huge potential for cooperation. As he left, chased by Chinese journalists and the Chinese flag, U.S. climate czar John Kerry took over.
The two largest economies in the world have agreed to work together to raise climate ambition.
Their joint declaration lays out a process to keep talking to each other. Among the key points, China is promising to work quickly to cut methane emissions, a major source of greenhouse gases, and they will hold their own bilateral climate summit next year. The U.S. and China have worked together on climate before, but that seemed to end here in Glasgow.
Not showing up? Come on.
When President Joe Biden chided China's leader for skipping the summit, but tonight's tone was different.
This declaration is a step that we can build on.
This had already been a day of drama with the summit's end approaching, with protesters decrying a lack of action from world leaders. And British Prime Minister Boris Johnson arriving to personally try to shepherd a final communique through what promises to be a treacherous few days.
Will you help us grasp that opportunity, or will you stand in the way?
The first draft of the communique urged all nations, including China, to speed up efforts to stop burning coal and to phase out subsidies for fossil fuels. Not specific enough for many in Europe, but too specific, it appears, for big oil producers. Chris Brown, CBC News, Glasgow.
The sun appeared briefly today, Amy Bell.
Yes. It was
I don't know,
lovely.
it was like 10 minutes? I
No,
don't remember.
It was more than that.
Was it?
It
Okay.
was. We saw things starting to clear fairly early in the morning. Then we had some more clouds come in, and then it cleared up again. But it did stay dry for the most part. So that's what we're going to take. Right now, we're just going to take a look at the current temperatures. Getting quite chilly across parts of the province. We're into 0 around Williams Lake, and we're up to -5, or down to -5, I should say, in Fort St. John. It has been a cooler couple of days, and that will continue. And then we will start to warm up as we head into the weekend. So taking a look for tomorrow, we will see hopefully that rain holding off early tomorrow morning. We will see a system arriving though overnight, and that is going to bring fairly substantial rain to us in the late evening, overnight, but it'll dry out before early morning. And then we will start to see things drying. And I think we'll see that next wave holding off until later in the morning. So that is great news, of course, for a lot of these Remembrance Day ceremonies. It's always nice when things are dry, but the day won't end that way. We will head into the rain late Thursday morning and into the afternoon, tapering off to showers for Friday. We will, of course, see snow in some of the more interior stretches. We still have some snow to fall on the Coquihalla and some of the other mountain passes, so you do need to still use extra caution. Taking a look tomorrow, a lot of this rain coming for the Vancouver Island stretches, so that will be the case for most of the day, but temperatures near the 10-degree mark. Whistler is getting a bit milder there, just enough to tip over from that snow we've been seeing in the village to straight rain for the next couple of days, and very wet as you head into the Fraser Valley. A little bit more sunshine pokes through in some areas, so Prince George, you will see some sun in the morning and then head into a mix of snow and some showers. Williams Lake, you'll head into showers later in the day, and same story for Cranbrook, though you will see things cool enough that you will head into just a chance of some late flurries. Taking a look at our forecast for the next 5 days, Saturday looks good, so let's keep that in mind. We do head into the rain, though, tomorrow afternoon, a high around 10, and in fact, staying around 10 right through into the overnight hours, so definitely on the warmer side for this time of year. Showers and a high of 11 for Friday, dropping down to 8 degrees, and then Saturday, very slight chance of some early morning showers. So that is the day you want to plan any of your outdoor activities, because we will have a nice mix of sun and cloud in the afternoon. Doesn't last, though. By Saturday, so in the overnight hours, we head back into the wet weather, and then we're in for wet weather on Sunday.
You heard her, kids. It's going to be a great couple hours on Saturday.
Enjoy it.
Have fun. In Toronto, building choices made by some real estate developers are causing a bit of concern. Wealthy homeowners looking to expand their house are building what's known as iceberg homes. Thomas Dagle explains what they are and why some say it's bad for the environment.
While many house hunters worry about real estate prices going up, wealthy homeowners are instead looking down. Beneath their houses in well-to-do neighborhoods, there's a trend taking root and causing a stir among neighbors.
But you can't go into a neighborhood, a residential neighborhood, and build what sounds like a boutique hotel.
The homeowners next door are building what's considered an iceberg house, as in there will be more to see below ground than above. A fad that's new to Toronto, imported from the well-heeled streets of the British capital.
There's a surprise around every corner in this house.
Our crew was given a rare tour of a London iceberg house on the market for about $8 million. Zoning restrictions prevented the developers from building higher up, so they dug down and made a lavish living space underground.
So it's a way of effectively adding to the value of your property by creating additional gross internal floor area.
From the movie theater room to those skylights and the spacious below-ground interior, it's an enticing design for a buyer with deep pockets. But back in Toronto, a 250-year-old maple tree had to be cut down to make room for the iceberg house. That was the first sign of environmental risks. And UBC professor Matthew Soules has seen what else can go wrong.
Anytime one is excavating deep into the earth, you run the risk of destabilizing soil and conditions around the property.
In 1954, Hurricane Hazel showed people in Toronto the devastating effects of flooding. Dozens died. And since then, this part of the city is considered environmentally sensitive. Longtime residents say building an iceberg house would only worsen risks driven by climate change.
Now, with the rains being so much stronger, longer, I'm afraid of flooding.
We reached her next door neighbor over the phone. He insists he's not building an iceberg house. He says it's just a normal basement. But the floor plans we obtained tell a much different story. The homeowners were given the city's approval to build a finished 2-story basement more than 6.5 meters below ground, complete with a karaoke lounge, a bar, a pool lounge, and a golf simulator, even a basketball court. Now this city councillor is trying to prevent others from doing the same.
We need to make sure there's regulation and policy around it to protect not just neighbors, but also the environment.
The message? Those with the money to dig deep should consider the real cost, with homeowners asked to do more to curb climate change, not worsen it. Thomas Dagle, CBC News, Toronto.
It's called Movember, a way to bring attention to prostate cancer. How one woman is jumping on the mustached bandwagon and who she's honoring. Next.
It's been a blast. I've actually been loving it. It's been challenging because I've been learning so much, but at the same time, I'm just so happy to be doing such a cool project that I've always wanted to do now for such a long time, and it just feels great. I'm out there, I'm smiling, I got my music going. Half the time I'm dancing, and I'm just building away. And a lot of people are stopping by because I started sharing the videos about the progress of the tiny house. And it's kind of like the whole community is getting on board with my little tiny house updates and, kind of supporting what I'm doing, which is actually really, really neat. So you can see my old door and the old windows. And she's sheathed in on the outside, but you can see that I don't have the roof on. It's a tiny house on wheels, and that means it's mobile, which means that I can say if something happened in the mining industry and there was a big layoff, because I work at the mine as well. If something happened and I needed a place to go and I was losing my house, it happened in Wabash Mines a few years ago. people were passing the keys back in to the banks and trying to do all that. And basically, I wouldn't be homeless. The wood stove is probably going to go right here. And but I picture, if I do use it as a creative space, which I probably am leaning towards something, I picture a small potter's wheel being down there, whereby I can look out the windows. Say if I'm parked, this could be like a cabin, like a camp, where I could park it next to some river. And let me try to show you this. I don't know if I can do it with one hand, but I made these windows here so that you could open up the side of the building. So essentially that opens up wide open to the outdoors. And the same thing on the other side. So the idea is that you're closer to being with nature. That was the idea of that. It's just for a bit of fun, really, But at the same time, there's some merit to the possibilities of what something like this could be used for.
Only yourself, but other people.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. The Vancouver Podcast Festival returns. Enjoy virtual workshops, panels, and networking, and hear from acclaimed podcast creators, hosts, and producers. Learn more at vanpodfest.ca. And never miss a special programming series or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver inbox and keep connected with us.
For some, the month of November is also Movember, a time when men are encouraged to grow a mustache to raise money and awareness about men's health issues. This year, a Regina woman decided to get in on it after prostate cancer hit close to home.
So we're raising money for prostate cancer, right? Christine donated $50, so I'm gonna draw a hair on my lip for Christine. And Jerry donated $100, so I'm gonna draw an even bigger lip. But even $5, you guys, will get a hair on my lip. And
as soon as my husband on November 1st started shaving his beard and mustache, I'm like, I need to do this too. This is really close to my heart now. It's not just a fundraiser. It's for my dad. My dad's name is Kim. It's kind of ironic that Movember is all about mustaches, and here now I'm raising funds in honor of my dad because my dad has a mustache. He always had a mustache ever since I was born. He's known for his perfect mustache. So last year, my father suddenly became ill. One day he couldn't walk, totally out of the blue. And so we rushed him to the hospital and we found out that he had a cancerous tumor that had compressed his spine and he became paralyzed. But that tumor on his spine, actually, it had metastasized from prostate cancer that we didn't even know was there.
My mustache is growing.
An eyebrow pencil wouldn't stay on, it would rub off. So then I'm like, okay, well, I'll use a Sharpie marker, it's permanent. So I started Sharpie markering that on. And then I started raising so much money, I needed more. And so now I wear this 24/7 for the whole month of November. So yeah, my dad is my person. He always has been. We've always been absolutely attached to the hip. And here he still is around. He is kicking prostate cancer's butt. So Movember is more than just a fun, goofy mustache. It honestly is saving lives. So yeah, the more people can donate, the better.
A reminder, tomorrow is Remembrance Day, and CBC Vancouver will have full coverage for you all day. That starts at 10:30 in the morning with the ceremony from the Vancouver Cenotaph at Victory Square. That will be live streamed on our website, cbc.ca/bc, and on our video app, CBC Gem. You can also find it on all of our social media channels, including Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Thanks for being with us here tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. Your next local news is at 11 o'clock, right after the National, with Isabel Regan. Good night.